my talk a lot about Republican eroticism, the unmentionable acts that they conduct, that they provide for billionaires and for Donald Trump. They just love it. They can't get enough of slathering up the billionaires and giving them all they got. And that is what I'm going to show you right now with Eric Burlison, a congressperson who was interviewed by Maria Bartiromo on Fox Business, being asked about tax cuts for the wealthy. And he goes into this absolute, just shameful performance of just worshiping at the throne of billionaires and the top 1% in this country. They pay enough in taxes. They've been abused for too long, he says. And then I'm going to go through some data, some numbers from both the Social Security Administration, right from their website, but also to explain exactly what the situation is with how much wealth the 1% controls, how much wealth the top 50%, or by reversal, by juxtaposition, how much wealth the bottom 50% does not control, and exactly what people are getting for their money. Anyway, here's Eric Burlison just embarrassing himself on national television.
Do you think that your members are going to feel that they'll vote for it if it's not a higher tax rate for the rich?
Yeah, I don't think that would go very far. That would absolutely throw a monkey wrench into the system. There's a lot of individuals. Look, the top 1% are right now paying 40% of the share of America's taxes, and yet they're not getting tremendously more from their money. It's not like the top 1% get to have that much more libraries or schools or roads. They're really footing the bill for most Americans. I think that if we increase those taxes, we've seen from history when they did have higher taxes, it really had a very negative impact on economic growth.
Yeah.
They're not getting tremendously more for their money. It's not like the top 1% get to have much more libraries or schools or roads. I don't know how many times I have to say it. The system is set up by the 1% to benefit them. If you think that they're not paying enough taxes, you're not paying attention. And that if you look back at a time when there was a progressive tax system in this country, where let's say you make $10 million a year, that every dollar after 10 million was, and I don't know exactly what these numbers are, but like back during the Eisenhower's administration, it was like 95%. Any dollar after a certain amount, not all of it, but every dollar after 10 million, you were taxed at a certain amount. And it kept the wolves at bay. And we were prosperous. You're telling me in the era that we created an interstate highway system, the United States wasn't prosperous? That's the kind of infrastructure and robust social programs that the social programs didn't even exist then. That wasn't until LBJ. But we could transform this country structurally and if we were to go back to a progressive tax system. This is from the Social Security Administration. This is another thing that the wealthy don't have to worry about, is receiving Social Security, but really even being taxed for Social Security. Again, this is from SSA.gov. In 2025, the maximum amount of earnings on which you must pay Social Security tax is $176,100. $176,100. So if you make $1 million a year, just $1 million, you're not even deep into the 1%. But if you make $1 million a year, 800,000 of that, 800,000 plus of that isn't taxed for Social Security. What does that say about all of the whining and complaining about Social Security being bankrupt and insolvent and all of this? That could be reversed immediately if they paid Social Security tax on every single dollar they earn. And just that would absolutely transform Social Security in this country. But they get out. They get out of having to pay. Here's the wealth distribution in this country. We don't even have to go and talk about the bottom 99% versus the 1%. We can just talk about the bottom 50%. The bottom 50% in this country have a share, 2% of the share of wealth in this country. And the top 1% in this country, a 31% share of the wealth. If you look at taxable revenue, the top 1%, yeah, they do pay 40% of the taxes. The bottom 50%, 3%. But that is because of the insane amount of wealth that they possess in this country. And by the way, none of these numbers even include payroll taxes. This is just income tax. Most of the bottom 50% in this country get taxed at a much higher rate because of payroll tax. It's just the way it is. And what I want to do, I want to finish with this. Back in January 8th of 2025, a guy named Scott Galloway, he's a podcast host with Kara Swisher. He's a millionaire. He teaches at NYU. He had this to say about wealth and income inequality in this country. And he put it so brilliantly that it needs to be on a loop on every YouTube channel, talking about how your life is not materially improved after a certain amount of money. And that's exactly what we're talking about right now relative to the wealth disparity and income inequality in this country. That if you make $50,000, your life is drastically improved if that amount is doubled to $100,000. But if you make $10 million, your life is almost no different if you make $20 million. That's the rub. It's about impacting and creating value in people's lives. Anyway, I'll come back on the other side of this. We'll talk about it a little bit. But here's Scott Galloway from the beginning of the year, really very prescient.
The Achilles heel is that 99%, the bottom 99% who are getting screwed, don't mind these policies because they believe at some point they're going to be in that 1%. But where are we? We're in a country that's had unprecedented prosperity, but similar to the way William Gibson described the future, it has not been evenly distributed. When 40% of U.S. households are struggling with some sort of medical or dental debt, when a quarter or 20% of households with kids are food insecure, and yet we have one man, Jensen Huang, and I like Jensen, who is now worth more than Boeing. I mean, something is wrong here. And just let me go to the psychology of happiness. I think a lot about happiness because I struggle with it, Joe. You effectively, once you get above a certain level of wealth, you get no incremental happiness. So why on earth would you not go back to a tax policy of the 60s, 70s, and 80s, where say above, pick a big number, 10 million, you actually pay more than 10%, maybe more than 20%, maybe more than 50%, because the difference between 30,000 a year for a household and 50,000 is enormous to the well-being of that household. Low-income kids in low-income households have higher resting blood pressure, but the difference between making 10 million a year and 15 million a year offers you no happiness.
Couldn't have said it better, didn't say it better. And that's a guy who is a multimillionaire. Understanding the basics. I don't know why we can't have members of Congress who do the same thing, who think the same way, who understand the plight of the working class in this country. We certainly need a lot more class solidarity than we do right now. We have this weird adherence to the American dream where people have been bamboozled to believe they have an opportunity to possibly, like it's in the cards for them that they're going to be as wealthy as Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos or Jeff Zuckerberg, or even just name a millionaire. The chances of you being a multimillionaire aren't good. The chances of you being a billionaire are virtually non-existent. The amount of money that Elon Musk has, I mean, I saw one of these, that the top 1% is one thing, but it's actually the top 0.1% of the 1% that control a massive portion. And going even further, about half of that 49 trillion is owned by the top 0.1%. That's only around 136,000 households and includes all of America's wealthiest people. That's remarkable. And yet this Republican has the temerity to go on TV and be a sounding board propagandist for billionaires as though they don't already have enough. that their lives will be made better if they pay 10% less in taxes. It's just gross. He's not looking out for his constituency because the vast majority of Americans aren't billionaires. The vast majority, 99 point whatever percent aren't billionaires. And those are the people he represents. Supposed to represent. Because his constituents there's not an outsized portion of them that are billionaires in his district. He's just doing what the dear leaders say to him because he is a puppet for billionaires. Anyway, what do you think? I invite you to this conversation. You can comment below. You can also call the voicemail line and leave me a fewer than 3-minute voicemail, 714-576-4054. And of course, as always, you can email me daily@dollemore.com. Follow me on social media. I am at Dollemore just about everywhere. I'd love to see you there. And I will see you next time. Until then, be genuine. Take care of one another.